All right, so this is a pretty advanced graph that I'm going to make in Playfair. Playfair isn't really meant to make this kind of thing, but I thought it might be possible, and it turns out it is. So it's maybe a nice look at the kinds of things you can do when you're really pushing Playfair to the limits. Now, this is a graph that originally ran in The Economist. I can't look at that original version because it's behind a paywall, but Andy Kriebel at viswiz.com did a version in Tableau that I really liked, and I decided to see if I could get pretty close to that in Playfair, and this is the result, and I think it came off pretty well. So again, this is not something that Playfair is really meant to be able to make, but you can, and I think it looks good, so I think it's an interesting test of Playfair's abilities. So let me show you how I have this data set up. So first of all, for each of these bars here, I have 3 rows in my data set. So for example, for the 2016 Republican primary in Iowa, you can see I have 1 row, 2 rows, and 3 rows. The reason I have 3 rows is because each of those is going to have the data for one of these bars, right? So these bars are the percentage of voters in these elections that identify as liberal, moderate, or conservative. Obviously, in a Republican primary, very few of the voters identify themselves as liberal. Some identify as moderate, but the vast majority identify as conservative. And then it's flipped over here, right? The vast majority identify as liberal. And then in the general election, and the point the economist was really trying to make was in the general election, right, there's a great moderation. And so now most voters identify themselves as moderate. All right, so I have one observation for three observations essentially for each of these rows to capture those bars. And you can kind of see how I've set that up here. I have a type column that has moderate, then conservative, then liberal, and the actual value there, 14%. Okay, so this is the 2016 Republican primary, and it's moderates in Iowa, so that's that value right there. That's 14%. I also have this, okay, so this X1 and X2, that took a little bit of data manipulation. What that basically is it's the lowest value and the highest value, regardless of whether that's liberal, moderate, or conservative. So for Iowa here, right, the lowest value is 1%, and the highest value is 85%. That just happens to be from liberal to conservative, but for others ones here, like for Michigan in the general election, for example, that goes from 26 to 39. That's from liberal to moderate. Okay, so these are just the bounds. That's how I'm going to draw my bars here. Okay, and then this part is fairly confusing. Playfair is not able to do what, if you are familiar with ggplot2, is called faceting, which basically means having several graphs on one graph, or you might know as small multiples, right? So this is not 3 different graphs. This is one graph. And the way I did this, you can see there's no y-axis, right? My y-axis is unlabeled. And normally what we might do with Playfair is we might give the y-axis we might make it a categorical label, right? So I might have the first value be like Iowa 2016 Republican primary, and I might have the second one be Nevada 2016 Republican, and so on and so forth. That approach probably could have worked here, but it'd be a little tricky, and I thought it would be easier if I just kind of faked this y-axis by making it numerical. So let me show you what I did. I wanted these ones to be the bottom. So this is, in fact, y equals 0 down here. So I wanted North Carolina to be at the bottom. So I said, okay, I'm going to have a rectangle that starts at y equals 5 and ends at y equals 9. And then I just incremented from there I put 1 space between them, right? So North Carolina ends at 9, Michigan's going to start at 10, and it's going to go to 14, so each of these bars is essentially 4 high on the y-axis, and so on and so forth, up until we get to this top observation here is going to be plotted from 170 to 174. It might make more sense when I plot it. I already told you what the type column was, and then the last column is where is the X position of this text right here. And so the reason I need that is because I'm going to be placing this text using a text element. And all I did to do that, to get that, is I added 2% to whatever the rightmost value was. So 85 becomes 87, 84 becomes 86, so on and so forth. Finally, this mid Y here is just the middle of 170 and 174. Again, I'm going to use that to place my text. Okay, let's grab all this data from that, and I'm going to come over to Playfair. And I already got this in. Let's refresh and get a fresh one. Okay. I don't think I have to mess with that stuff here. I'm going to make a few changes here. I'm going to make this a much taller graph. I'll go ahead and turn the logo off. Okay, and then let's just start drawing this piece by piece. So first is the rectangles. Again, these rectangles right here, right, and going back to look at our Excel, basically the way they're going to be made is they're going to go from x1 to x2. And then they're going to go from y start to y end. So they start at x1, they go to x2, they start at y start, they go to y end. I don't have to specify a color for them. Okay, that gives me that. Just realized I'm going to need this later. Hang on. I'll go ahead and do this now. So, this is that graph. I want to grab something from here, which is I had a custom color menu made for this. Okay, so right now this doesn't look like anything, right? This looks pretty bad. All right. But we have a lot of styling to do. So before we do that styling, let's get the we also want to get these bars on here. So the way I did that was with segments. And so again, the way I'm going to do these segments is I'm going to have them use these y start and y ends as well. But then their x is just going to be the value, right? So these start and end on value. And then they go from y start to y end. And I do actually want to give them color according to the type. Let's chart that. Okay, now you can see I've just added these little lines in here, but they don't look very good. I have a lot of styling to do. So I'm going to grab some stuff I did over here real quick. So the first thing I did is I changed my qualitative color scale to just gray here. What is that going to do? Well, it means that it's going to default draw all of these rectangles in that gray. So that we can see those better, let's change the chart fill to white. Okay. Let's turn off the axes. Fantastic. And let's go ahead and get the text elements in here real quick. So I'm going to hop over to text elements. Percent of U.S. voters in selected swing states who identify themselves as moderate, conservative, or liberal. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and chart that. You notice this has a gray background, so let's go to header and let's also make it a white background. I have a lot of space here because Playfair has decided that this axis needs to go all the way to 200. Actually, I'm not going to kill this legend out yet. I'll do that in a second. So let's also pop over here to design axes, and I'm going to have let's see. Well, so I'm going to kill out these axes anyways, but in order to contain this well, let's just take out the 200 there, and then let's give it limits from 0 to 180. I think that should, Okay, now I'm using like all of that chart space. That's great. I still have why do I have such a big gap here? It did go through 180, right? Or it went through like 174, right? So let's, okay, that's a little better. All right, so I've killed that out. There's some more stuff I want to kill out. As you've seen with a lot of these graphs, I'm going to kill out the ticks. So let's set the x tick length to 0, the y tick length to 0. Okay. Oh, actually, you know what? I want x ticks. That's right. I do have little x ticks here. So let's set that to like 2 and just have tiny little. Let's go ahead and use the default. Okay, and then the other thing I'm going to do, I'm going to make these labels on the x-axis a little smaller, and then you'll notice I have them going from 0 to 100 on the finished product. So let's go do that real quick. I'm going to do a custom axis, and I'm going to have it go all the way up like that. Okay, so that's looking good now. Now I still have these y-axes that I don't want, so let's pop over to y-ticks. This is kind of a bug with Playfair right now. There's no, you can't, if you set this to 0 pixels, Playfair will not like it. So you have to set this to something like 0.1, and you'll notice that those are now gone. Okay, so I got all this now. Now, another thing I'm going to grab from over here is I changed my grayscale color. Grayscale color isn't used a lot, but it is used for the segment element, and so these pieces here are actually based on that. Now the other thing I want to do is in the segments tab, I want these to be a lot thicker, right? So right now they're tiny. Let's make them 5 pixels wide. Boom, that looks pretty good. I'm actually going to make them just 4 pixels. You know, another thing I noticed that I kind of didn't like about the one I made initially, and I'm going to correct now, is it's really a narrower graph. So let's do that as well. You can't really see, so this graph, I mean, it starts right here now. Okay, now I actually don't need this key, so let's kill out this key. That's looking great. We're getting pretty close actually already. Oh, one thing that I missed is that the 0, while all the X grid lines are generally not there, the 0 grid lines are. So if we turn on the X grid lines, we're going to get all these, which I don't want, right? But if you go to settings and you go to X grids, you'll notice that there is a X grid 0 opacity, and then there's an X grid opacity. So you can actually differentiate between all these lines and the 0 line. So I'm going to do that. Okay, how am I doing? I want to have, you know, one thing I'm going to do real quick is I'm going to change this x-axis to go to 176 or something. That's just going to make this line run up a little more, which I think looks nice. All right, now I want these text labels over here on the right, and to do that I'm going to use the text element. So let's pop over there. Remember, I have a specific variable for these, text x. I want them to be centered at mid y, and then the text is just going to be the state. Let's chart that. Okay, now you'll notice these are positioned really poorly. That's because by default, the text element, the text charting element, centers them on your x variable, which is not what I want. So let's pop over to the parameters for the text elements, and instead of middle, let's say start. Start, middle, and end are your options here. Boom. Now they're starting 2% out from where they were, and now they look quite nice, I think. Okay, so I got that. My legend came back. That happens sometimes. All right, I really like how this is looking. I really just have a couple more things to do here. So I need to, whoops, I'm clicking off the graph. Oh, you know what I didn't even think of? I don't have enough room on the left of the graph, do I? Okay, so I'm going to have to give myself a left margin here. So let's make that left margin like 70. Okay, now I ought to have enough room over. Actually, I really almost want that to be even larger. Yeah, let's do that. Okay, so now let's just put in these. So 2016 Republican primary, and then let's do the 2016 Democratic primary. Playfair does not have tools for making sure that your text is like on the left. If you really want to be picky, you can hold up a piece of paper and see if it's all lined up. All right, and then this is going to be the 2012 general election, and let's get that roughly where it should be. Well, actually, I think this needs to be over a fair bit, and this probably also needs to be over a fair bit. I could line those up more precisely, but I actually think that looks pretty good. Okay, so we got that. The only thing we're missing is the sort of the key. And so in the original graphic, they had a little square, and then that square and the key was the color, the appropriate color. I can't do those little squares. There's really no good way to do that in Playfair, at least not without a lot of work. So instead what I'm going to do is, as you can see over here, I'm just going to color the word itself. And the way to do that, which you might have seen in another tutorial, is to essentially create this new annotation. I'm going to make it bold, and I'm basically just going to put it over my existing thing, and then I'm going to color it. So moderates are gray. Oh, that reminds me, I need to do one more thing, which is I have a specialized color menu here. So if you haven't played with this, right, if you come over to settings and you go to the color menu, this is the color menu that shows up when you right click. So I'm going to redraw this with annotation so I can keep what I just did. And now I have this new color menu, which is exactly the color menu I want. So there's the moderate one. I'm going to clean this up in a second. So here's conservative. Again, I'm making these bold and upsizing them a fair bit. That's going to be red. Okay, this is not a perfect fit, but it doesn't have to be. I'll show you why in a sec. And then I'm going to make this one liberal, and I'm going to okay, now the reason it doesn't have to be a perfect fit is because I'm just going to like take all this away and then kind of fake it. So I just need to get the commas in the right places. I'm just going to do that with spaces, and yeah, that's it. Moderate, conservative, or liberal. That looks pretty good. So this is the finished graph. This is a narrower version that's probably a little closer to the original. I really used way too much X width on this original. That looks really cool. So that's a pretty difficult graph to do in Playfair, but possible. It takes some weird data setup, but you know, looks pretty good. All right.